Fifth grade, today you are getting watercolors, a palette, some water, and a bunch of other things to try to practice your watercolor techniques. Remember, we are doing our space paintings in tertiary colors, so that is something you're going to have to mix in your palette because it's not straight in your watercolor container. So that would be like your reds mixed with orange. So you're going to take the red and kind of get it wet and bring it over to your palette. Rinse. Grab the color next to it, which is your secondary color. So you're mixing a secondary with your primary. So there's a red-orange. You would do your yellows, your yellow greens, your yellow oranges. Biggest thing is don't dig in the paint. Just get it wet and transfer it over. And then grab a little bit from the one next to it, and you'll get those different variations. For space, you might want to go into your blue violets and blue greens. And just knowing how to mix them and get your different shades and stuff. So you can always test these on a scrap piece of paper next to you. Then what I want you to do after you've kind of mixed your tertiaries, you're going to have way more than this. You're going to have 6 actually. Then I want you to use those paints to do your watercolor techniques. So you've already set up this paper that has all of your techniques on it. The first one is wash. So that one you wet with your water. And wash is for big sections like your skies and lakes and things. You put just plain water. And then after that, you're going to grab a color. And then your color is then going to go over the water. And it really glides really easily. So that's for big areas. I'm going to skip one so this one doesn't bleed into the next one. So on the next one, I'm going to do dry brush. I'm going to grab paint just straight from my paint palette. For dry brush, I've rinsed it, but I can also take and use a paper towel and kind of dab the brush and get a lot of the water off. And then you just take already wet paint that you already prepared, and that's just going to be, whatever you want to do, because you can control your brush strokes better. So that's for your outlining or really specific details. You always want to do that on dry paper. Your resist, that's this one here. My camera is not showing everything, so I'm trying to get it all in view. Resist is the one where you use white crayon. So I'm going to have white crayons available for you. And in resist, you might want to do your stars or your swirls or your clouds. So you're drawing that wherever you want something to be white, you draw it in crayon. And then you just take your paint over the top of it, and it shows up your whatever you colored with the white crayon. It's going to show up and stay white because the wax kind of seals that paper and resists having the paint sink in. So there's resist. I'm going to skip sponge for now. Just let my resist dry since it's so wet. I'm going to show you a little bit about salt. Salt is also a good one for stars or for a snowy day or for rain. If you take your paint and do a wash first, if you have a big section, you of course don't have to have a wash, but you want the paper to be really wet. And then I'm kind of spreading my color here. And then when you take a salt shaker over the top of it, it kind of absorbs, and you'll see it better once it dries, but if I zoom in, I think my camera will stop working, but you can see all the little crunchy crystals. When they dry, they leave a nice speckled effect. Let's go back up to wet in wet. I'm going to put another wash down where the paper is going to be really wet. Trying to stay away from the one prior to it so that my techniques don't look really messy. But then when you take wet and wet, you can take another color that you've kind of prepared in your dish and kind of touch it to there, and you'll get almost like a starburst effect. To get, you could do this as a texture in the sky, some sort of sunset or the colors from a planet. Let's go down to sponge. Now sponge you're going to want to use your palette for to prepare your colors so that you can kind of pick it up with a damp sponge, a damp clean sponge. And then you're going to just squeeze that color into your sponge and put that onto the paper. You dab it all over, and that would be a great one for like the texture of mountains. I'm going to grab some straight from the dish so it's a little bit more bold. The edge of a cliff, maybe sandy areas. Oops, I got a little bit of black in there. If there's ever something you don't like on your picture, just a damp paper towel nearby that you can kind of dip in your water every once in a while can kind of sometimes pick up some of the boldness of your color, and you can blot it out, but you can see that I also blotted out my texture, so you don't want to overdo it. And then the last one that I want you to try is plastic wrap. Now plastic wrap right here might give you a completely different texture. You're going to put it straight in the paint because I don't have any prepared left in my palette. I'm just going to go straight into here and show you what plastic wrap does. It's kind of the same effect of the sponge, except it gives a more crunchy look to it, a rougher texture than the sponge. Sponge is a texture, but it's a little bit softer and delicate, where plastic wrap can really give you those crisp edges that you need. So we have salt. You'll see that better when it dries. Plastic wrap, sponge, resist, dry brush, wet, and wash. When it's done, you're going to take it to the drying rack and you are going to clean your own brush. Thanks for listening.